All right, folks, sit back, grab your popcorn, and get ready for the saga of the country that brought you the iPhone, the movies you love, and even the idea that being great again is a solid political slogan. Yes, we're talking about the United States of America, also known as the Land of Dreams, or at least a lot of people's dreams. But like every good story, this one also started with a few mistakes, fights, and a bunch of people who didn't quite know where they were going. Chapter 1. We're born, now hold on tight. It all started on the glorious July 4th, 1776, also known as the day the barbecues began, when the United States decided to break up with Mother England. That's the famous Independence Day, or, to the insiders, the day when everything started going downhill for the rest of the world. But hold on. Before that, about 16,000 years earlier, there were already some people living in the area, the original inhabitants of America, who came over from Eurasia. They kicked things off, but their role was modest, and after the Europeans arrived, they sort of lost their starring role. Chapter 2. Who really discovered this place anyway? And here's where the old argument begins. Who really discovered America? The Native Americans who were already here, or the Europeans who showed up later and declared, "Look, a new place"? To complicate things further, we have another debate. Columbus or the Vikings? It's like one of those never-ending family debates at Sunday lunch. Columbus swore he had reached India, but it was really just the Caribbean, a major GPS fail. As for the Vikings, they arrived earlier in Canada and named the place Vinland, but then went back home, maybe because they found it boring or forgot their phone chargers. Anyway, can we agree that the term discovery is a bit outdated? At this rate, calling it that might even land you in jail soon? Chapter 3. The European Shuffle, and a few fights along the way. But then, who actually patented the discovery of the Americas? Well, nobody really. The Native Americans were here first, but they kind of forgot to tell the Europeans. So the Europeans showed up all innocently, saw the space, and told the rest of the world like they owned the place. Now about Columbus and the Vikings, it's even more complicated. Leif Erikson, the bold Viking, landed in Canada and named it Vinland. But no one quite understood what he wanted, so he left. Columbus, on the other hand, totally by accident, thought he was in India, but ended up in the Caribbean. And, well, the rest is history. Chapter 4. The Great Race for the New World. And that's how the real race for the continent began. The Portuguese and Spanish were the first to dominate the territory, but soon the English got jealous and decided to stick their noses in where they weren't invited. John Cabot accidentally showed up in 1497, and there you go. But the English didn't start serious colonization until 1580, under Queen Elizabeth I, because they wanted to mess with the Spanish and make some money along the way. Chapter 5. The English Play Dirty and Marriages? At first, the English were just looking to do a bit of trading and play war games with the Spanish. But in the 17th century, things changed, and they started chasing gold and silver. The natives, like the Powhatans, got pissed and started attacking, but the English didn't back down. In the midst of all this drama, a guy named John Rolfe married Pocahontas, the daughter of the Powhatan chief. For a while, things cooled down, until the first African slaves arrived in 1619, which really turned up the heat. Chapter 6. New players, new fights, and a city named after a sandwich. Starting in 1630, other Europeans wanted a piece of the action. Swedes, Dutch, and French all lined up to grab some territory. But it didn't last long, especially after the English kicked the Dutch out in the Anglo-Dutch Wars and took what is now New York. Another nasty fight broke out in 1675 called King Philip's War. The English were almost done for, but in 1678 they finally beat the natives. Now we come to the final showdown between the English and the Americans' taxes. With the 7 Years' War bill running sky high, England thought it would be a great idea to increase taxes on the colonies, especially on sugar. And that, my friend, was the spark. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, leading the Continental Congress, decided it was time to cut the umbilical cord. On July 4, 1776, the Uncle Sam Club was officially born. The fight was on. England sent all the troops they could to crash the American rebels' party. The Americans, practically broke and terrified of the British Navy, called in the French, Dutch, and Spanish, who were all dying to get back at the English. In the end, in 1783, with the Treaty of Paris, the British went home with their tails between their legs. George Washington became the first president, and then they started fighting with the French because, of course, no one can go too long without a new fight. After that, it was one war after another. The War of 1812 ended with the English burning down the White House. No need to say they didn't remain friends after that, right? But wars also united people, just like the Paraguayan War did in Brazil. The Industrial Revolution finally hit the States, and the country began to grow at a wild pace. Chapter 10. From gold to oh my God, did that just happen? Then came the Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, with the country split over the issue of slavery. Lincoln led the North to victory and abolished slavery, but not before ensuring the bloodiest war in American history. After that, Uncle Sam didn't lose a single war, not the Spanish-American War, nor World War I, although they were dragged into that last one somewhat reluctantly. Chapter 11. Money, Depression, and War, Part 2. After World War I, the U.S. economy grew rapidly, but then crashed during the Great Depression. Then President Roosevelt came in to save the day, and things seemed to improve, until 1939 when World War II broke out. Uncle Sam tried to stay out, but after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, he jumped right in and ended it with a bang, dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Chapter 12. The war that was cold, but actually pretty hot. And then came the Cold War, with the US and the Soviet Union competing to see who could be the world's savior the fastest. Between invasions, the space race heated up, and the Americans won by putting a man on the moon. Vietnam was the only war Uncle Sam lost, but soon after, the Soviet Union fell apart, and the Cold War finally ended. Epilogue. Still here and ready for more drama. And of course, the United States is still around, strong as ever, poking its nose everywhere. The biggest economic and military power in history is still in action, and by the looks of it is not planning to stop making noise anytime soon. From 9/11, which made it clear that not everyone was up for the American show without a protest, to today, the country remains one of the most influential in the world, with policies that sometimes seem like they come straight out of an action movie script. And there you have it, folks. The history of the United States, with more twists than a Mexican soap opera, more fights than a reality show, and more surprises than a championship final. Until the next round, and don't forget to prepare the tea. Who knows? We might end up in another revolution soon.